Welcome to the next episode of the Austin Bar Association's Council of Firsts. I'm your host, Amanda Arriaga, First Latina Bar President. Today we talk to Sandra Avila Ramirez, first Latina judge elected to the 98th District Court. Judge Avila Ramirez is a graduate of St. Edward's University and Texas Tech University School of Law. She worked with her family as a migrant farm worker through high school and truly embodies the concept that representation matters. She's a lifelong public servant, having served as a volunteer firefighter, an EMS first responder, a prosecutor in Cook County and Travis County, and an attorney at Texas Rio Grande Legal Aid. She most recently had her own firm where she focused on criminal and juvenile defense cases with primarily Spanish-speaking clients. Besides seeing her at the courthouse, you might know Judge Avila Ramirez from movies, TV shows, and commercials, including the upcoming movie, La Gloria. I'm excited today to talk to my friend, Judge Avila Ramirez. Thank you for being here.
Thank you for having me. I'm excited to be here.
I want to start at the beginning and ask, why did you want to be a lawyer?
So I think that I grew up in a generation in my mom was from Mexico, first generation on her side, where the only way you could improve your station in life was to be a doctor or a lawyer. And I think as I got older, I wanted to hold people accountable for hurting others, and I wanted to protect victims. And so I think, honestly, I became a lawyer to be a prosecutor. That was my calling, because at the time I thought this is the only way that you can do those things.
And you became a prosecutor in 2 different counties. Why did you start in Chicago and then come later to Austin?
So my parents actually had a connection to Chicago. My sister and my brother were both born there. And I wanted to do a big city. I wanted to, and I don't know why I didn't choose New York, because apparently, I guess when I was little, I had a Barbie that was from New York. I don't remember that, but a friend of mine told me, she says, oh, yeah. So, and Chicago just appealed to me, and I wanted to do the big city. So, that was my big city. So I went to Chicago.
So you practiced in Chicago and Cook County, and then you ended up back in Texas. How did you make that jump and why?
Well, I don't know that Chicago was permanent, but I think at the time you don't know, you just kind of go, right? I don't know if this was a big part of it. I ended up hospitalized for a week because I ended up with an injury. You're 27, you think you're invincible. I ended up with like a DVT and had me hospitalized for a week. And I think I got homesick to the point where I thought, okay, maybe this is not something that's working out.
Well, yeah, because if you're sick, you want to be where your family is, so they have a chance of driving to take care of you and not having to board a plane to take care of you.
Well, you know what's funny about that? So my mom didn't go with my dad to drop me off to Chicago. She was upset that I was going so far. But when I said I was going to come back, she was the first one in line with my dad in their little U-Haul to go get me. So yes, I did. I was lucky enough that my parents went to go get me from Chicago.
Well, you had a great career as a public servant for over 20 years, helping people, helping Spanish-speaking people. Then you decided to run for judge. Why did you want to be a judge?
I think that I realized, you can do a lot of good, right, as a lawyer. I think, you learn the law, you apply it. But I realized that as a judge, you also have that discretion where you can pick up where the law leaves off. And I think especially for people, maybe vulnerable populations that are not always or historically have not always been protected or helped, I wanted to fill that gap. And I thought that I got to a place in my career where I would be a really good judge.
Well, and you just started, but I can tell you are going to be a really good judge for a really long time. And there are so many courts in Austin, in Texas, that you could be the judge for. But you specifically wanted to be the judge for the 98th District Court. What is so important about the 98th District Court?
So the 98th District Court, although a general jurisdiction court, has been a specialty court of sorts for juvenile for decades. I remember as a juvenile prosecutor, I was there in 2007, and I worked under Judge Muir. And I really, really loved juvenile law. I had done children's rights while at Legal Aid, and so I had represented children, and I think the juvenile law really interested me, and I kept coming back to that. And so for me, that was my bench. It wasn't, and I know folks are like, well, I want a bench, I just want to run for judge. No, I wanted specifically the juvenile court bench. In Travis County alone, over half of the children referred are Latino. About 85% roughly are Black and brown children. At the time, there were 4 judges hearing cases, none of them were Latino. And I thought I don't understand this. And I thought, to me, representation absolutely matters. I want to take that bench. I want those kids to see that just because you're different or just because you look different doesn't mean you don't belong up there. And that was very important to me because I want all children to be seen. I want those minors to be seen as children. Obviously, depending on the offense, they engage delinquent conduct they engage in, we have different options. But I want all of them to start off as children, especially brown and Black children.
And so in your case, representation matters means a couple of different things. You are Latina, so you look like the kids are in this population, but you actually have represented these kinds of cases. So why is it so important that as the judge, you actually have served on these types of cases and know how it works?
Because you understand the limitations. I've been a juvenile prosecutor and I've been a juvenile defense attorney. And you understand each side has its limitations. And, as a state, even though you have an idea of what you want to do with a case, you may not necessarily be able to carry that out because your supervisor might disagree. As a defense attorney, you might want certain things, but the state might not be in agreement and the court might not be in agreement. So I think as the judge, you have that perspective from both sides, which I think is crucial because I think it helps you understand public safety. It helps you understand best interest of the child. And that's exactly what you look at when you're practicing juvenile law.
Well, so you end up being uniquely suited for this role. So I'm so happy that we have you there. And you just started in this role.
I did. I think I'm lucky, and I will say this, and this doesn't hurt my feelings. I know a lot of people don't care about juvenile law. And my response is always, it's okay. I don't need you to care. I just need you to get out of my way so that I can try to do my best to try to do a good job here and try to make a difference.
What do you hope to accomplish?
The biggest thing I think I want is for more, consistency, more fairness in application of the law. I don't want to see so many brown and Black children in the system. I think obviously all of us would want to just say we don't want to see anybody in the system, any children. But I think especially brown and Black children, I think there's a perception, and I know I've heard the term adultification, where maybe they're not perceived as children, especially boys. You see brown boys, you see Black boys, they're seen as threats. They're seen as, criminals, suspects. And to me, it would be great if, and this isn't just law enforcement, it's in schools as well. You look at statistics. Historically, more brown and Black children are referred, for disciplinary issues. They're treated differently. So I would love for us to maybe, generally speaking, that we start viewing them the same as all the other children. Because I think when you can identify or you can see them as your kids, you're more willing to say, let's treat them as our children. And how do we want to teach them? What do we want to teach them?
Judge, there are people that do not understand the difference between juvenile justice and the adult criminal justice system, but they are different. And the family code talks about those differences. Can you explain to our audience what they are?
Sure. So I think in adult court, and I'll do it from the perspective just as a prosecutor, knowing that I was a former prosecutor in both. So in adult court, your goal is to ensure that justice is served, right? Whatever that looks like, but justice is served. So you look at the defendant. You don't have to look at them and say what's in their best interest. In juvenile court and the statute, it clearly tells you, you have to consider the child's best interest. What you do, though, is you also look at public safety. So the goal is to try to remove the taint of criminality as much as possible from the juvenile setting, which makes sense, right? Because these kids are growing. They are developing. They're not even developed mentally fully. Boys, I think, until their mid-20s, girls a little bit older or a little bit younger. But the idea is that they're still developing, they're still understanding. And so we need to come in and show them or help them understand, right? Or give them tools that they need to be able to be held accountable. Because accountability is also part of it. I think people forget that. But in juvenile court, it is absolutely a balance between public safety and what is the best interest of that child.
Well, and you and I have talked about this, and I've talked about this with some of the other guests who've been on this show, that there is sometimes a spectrum that goes from the child welfare system to the juvenile justice system to the adult criminal justice system. And so what you are doing with your court is really important because it could be that you are standing between the child going to adult criminal justice.
That is absolutely true. And I think, a lot of our kids, a lot of referrals that go through juvenile court are going to be kids who need more services. Maybe they're vulnerable, they're at risk, but that's the majority of them, right? And I think you give them those tools. They may have grown up, in a household where there was family violence, where there was, they were being sexually assaulted or sexually abused, all these things that they see, or they were just in a really emotionally abusive, household. And so they have all these learned behaviors, which they carry with them, and they don't know how to cope. They were never given the right tools. And so that's where we come in, and we have to try to help unlearn or at least teach those healthy coping mechanisms, right? A lot of it is that children don't know how to express their fear, their anger, their frustration. So we have to guide them. Some adults aren't even able to do that. We see that, especially if it's something where you've suffered some trauma and you never addressed it, you've never dealt with it. That doesn't give you, right, a green light to hurt everybody else. And we can certainly understand where that comes from. But we have to work on that self-improvement to say, you know what, I realize now, maybe I didn't have the best coping mechanism, so I need to change that. And so what we like to do, what we want to do, I want to continue doing in juvenile court because I didn't start it. I want to continue offering those options. It's not just about, let's get you adjudicated and get you a record and have you on your way. We don't want a school to prison pipeline. We don't want a juvenile court to adult court pipeline. We want to, as many kids as we can, try to give those tools so that we can improve their lives. I think realistically, we can't fix everything. I think we have to be realistic about that. But that doesn't mean we don't try, right? And so I think we try to, depending on each case is very different, what are the best options that we've got to try to give them a better opportunity to be able to grow into productive, community-oriented citizens that are going to be held accountable, but also while taking care of themselves and maybe the things in their past that caused them that hurt or, caused them to be there to begin with.
Well, it sounds a little bit like when you talk about tools and healthy coping and looking at patterns, that some of your experience as a lifelong public servant, doing things like being an EMS first responder, doing things like being a volunteer firefighter, might help guide you in this role. What else do you think might help guide you in this role?
I think life experience, but also just kind of looking at just your past professional experiences and the need. There's so much need. I remember when I was at Legal Aid, just helping all my clients were victims of family violence. And so primarily I represented women and the children. When I did children's rights, they were also, the most vulnerable. So I think understanding the needs go deep in terms of, and, it's not a one size fits all. I think that helped tremendously. I also, just from my personal experiences, pay it forward is a mantra of mine, just because I remember whenever my mom, was a single parent, she would have, car issues or whatever it was. Poverty was something that I know it happens to a lot of us, but we always had compassionate, amazing people helping us along the way. And I always thought paying it forward is so important. Legal Aid assisted my mom when we were younger. And so I always look at that and I think to myself, these are the organizations that appeal to me, but there's so much need. And these vulnerable populations are generally not represented, maybe especially in the legal field. And so that really, I think, is something that drives me.
Well, speaking of organizations, you have had a very difficult job where you are a hard charger, but you also do some fun things. And you help people behind the scenes as well. So what organizations have meant the most to you personally or professionally?
So I think professionally, definitely the nonprofits, the public service, government agencies, all the ones that help that target population, right? The most vulnerable, children, victims of crime, women, just any organization, unhoused, any organizations that help the most vulnerable populations because they're the ones that need it the most. And to be fair, there are a lot of people in need, absolutely. But our resources are not unlimited. So we I always call it triage, right? You just kind of look at where is the most need and that's where you go. Professionally, those are the organizations. Personally as well, though, I think those are the things, when I go to community events, for me, my mom being from Mexico, she immigrated to this country when she was 18 years old. I thought I was a baddie going to Chicago right out of law school. This woman is coming without even speaking the language to a different country at 18. So that's always near and dear to me. So Todos Juntos, I have all these organizations that help immigrant communities. And they don't just help women, but there's different focuses, right? But, immigrant, communities, Con Mi Madre, all these organizations that help, women, immigrant women and children. Those call to me. I love, being part of those organizations, helping in any way, I think professionally and personally. But I think for me, the big thing, acting has always been something that I love to do when I was little. So I wanted to be a performer. I mentioned earlier, in order for me, in my station in life, if I would have told my mom I want to be an actor, they would have been like, you're crazy, go be a doctor or a lawyer, right? But now that I'm older, that little wanting to be a performer bug it never left. And so I was lucky enough when I moved to Austin, for like the 10th time and then finally never left. I was in my early 30s, so I started just acting. I auditioned to go perform with a comedy troupe. I ended up, I don't know how I did this. I ended up with an agent. It was so much fun. And I got to be silly. I got to just not take myself seriously. And it was so much fun. And I think it's a good, I don't want to use the word balance, but to me, it helped me regroup because, I mean, life is hard, right? Whether in your profession, most professions are difficult, they're stressful, and you kind of get a chance to kind of just get lost in whatever you're doing and play this character and just go crazy or do something you'd never do in real life. And it's a lot of fun. And then when you see the product or something's really called to you, I did this little short film, and it's probably the biggest role I've ever had. Because to be clear, I mean, my joke is I'm regionally famous. You know, I've been in commercials and stuff, but it's like, you know, for 2 seconds. I've been in a movie.
But I'll pause the commercial and then I take a screenshot and then I send it to you because my friend was doing a commercial.
I know. But it's like, you know, if it's a movie, it's like, oh, yeah, I was in it for 5 whole seconds. You know, that's always my yes. You can recognize me. But there was one movie in particular, In Tow. It's a short film. It's a 20-minute short film. I played one of the leads. And it's about this woman and her daughter who are their mobile home is getting repossessed with them in there, right? Obviously, that I don't think ever happens. But the idea it was the struggle, the sacrifices that mom made. And I shot this film. I want to say my mom had recently passed. And so I was able to just release that and grieve her in that way. And it helped tremendously. You know, I have a very strong character but I'm just like so serious when it comes to work and all these other things. But it's nice to just have that release, right? Because we all have to take the step back and we have to be okay in order for us to be able to continue and be okay for others. What do they say in the airplane? You put your mask on yourself first. I just read that somewhere and I thought, oh, that's so fitting, but it's so appropriate. It's true. Take care of yourself so that you can take care of others.
Well, and by the way, it's fun for those of us watching you. There is the judge is being modest. She was in a movie with Ben Affleck. That's a famous person. And I wouldn't have thought about the movie except a mutual friend of ours said, you have got to watch this movie because she's in it. So then I called my parents and I was like, you're looking for something to watch? You got to watch this movie because I have a friend in it. So you are more than regionally famous to some of us.
Thank you. I appreciate that. Well, actually, you know, the most fun thing that I've done a lot of fun things, but I was in a movie with Al Pacino. People don't know that. And it's really funny. When I say that, you know, like the older generation is like, Al Pacino. I was at an elementary school and I said, Al Pacino. So then I was like, do y'all know Taylor Swift? Yes. Okay. As famous as Taylor Swift. And I got other adults saying, no, Taylor Swift is. So that was my way to try to kind of bring it back. But yes, in 2013, I shot a film locally. It was Manglehorn. It was an independent, and it was an Austin director. And so I got to improv this scene with Al Pacino. And I spoke nothing but Spanish. I had my kid locked in the car. My keys are in there. He plays the locksmith, so he comes and gets it. And we're trying to communicate. And it was funny because we improvised the whole thing. And he asked me how I said a word in Spanish, right? And I just was so excited because I got to do this. I got to improv with Al Pacino. Holy cow. Even if it was for 5 seconds at the beginning of the film, but still.
I'm excited for you to do your rulings at court and then say, you guys. Also, I worked with Al Pacino and Ben Affleck and sort of Taylor Swift, but not really.
No, well, I just brought her up just to use her as an example. But yeah, if I say Al Pacino and maybe Ben Affleck, if I say Batman, maybe. But yeah, these juveniles, listen, this is when I feel my age. I'm like 52 and I make these references. And even like, you know, growing up, I wanted to be a performer. I wanted, you know, I'm like, do you all know Kids Incorporated? They look at me like, what's that? You know, pre-Disney, but to me, it was Kids Incorporated. Do you know that show?
Of course I know that show. And I know it in part because Mario Lopez, who was later AC Slater on Saved by the Bell, was on it. So, yes, obviously, we are in the same generation. So when you get a movie with Zach Morris and not AC Slater, please let me know and I'll come and drop something off.
Oh, okay.
You just let me know.
Okay.
I'm happy to help.
Zach Morris, gotcha. Duly noted.
What advice would you give for lawyers who want to follow in your footsteps?
I think they need to just go for it. I think, you know, one of the funny things, running was very interesting. I think that there are different schools of thought on that. Some people say, oh, this is a trajectory you have to follow. These are all the things you have to do. These are all the organizations you have to join. This is the right way to do it. There is no right way. Let me tell you, things are changing, thank goodness. And you, as long as you're passionate about what you're doing, especially with law, if you want to be a judge, you just follow the law that makes you happy, the law that you enjoy. That's how you end up realizing, oh, this is what I want. This is where I want to be. That would just be my only encouragement is nobody you don't need to ask for permission from anybody else, right? As long as your family's okay with it, it is a big commitment. As long as you're wanting to put your best foot forward and you have the best intentions, which are, to improve the community or to try to make that change or whatever it is on that bench, I say go for it. And I think especially having just different experiences, different, like I said, different routes, different paths to follow. What's important to you, organizations that are important to you may be organizations that, historically just haven't really been looked at. Again, if you're passionate about what you're doing, it's going to show and you're going to be an asset on the bench.
Well, fortunately for us and for the children and families of Travis County, you are an expert in juvenile law. You wanted to have this bench and you got this bench, and you'll be able to make a difference for those children and families.
I appreciate you saying that. It's really funny because I do not consider myself an expert at all. But I think I am very knowledgeable, absolutely. And am I willing to get the answer? Absolutely. And if I don't have that answer, I know where to go to find it. I think a lot of it is having that desire and that passion to say, absolutely. I don't know it all. We will never know it all. But I am absolutely willing to do the right thing and to work hard to get us there.
Well, thank you so much for being here today. I really appreciate it, and we'll see y'all next time.